Thank you, Raif, and thank you, Noma, and the organizing committee for letting me open this workshop. I'll share my screen really quick. Okay, so in recent decades, a new mode of artistic memory work has emerged alongside conventional forms of commemoration, such as museums, monuments, or heritage preservation. This new mode seeks to create not only memory, but also a memorial intervention in the present, even if only temporarily. Such artistic production include participatory or accessible memory practices such as tours and tour guides, remapping, signposting, and visual projections, and site-specific performances. They blur the boundaries between art, commemoration, and political activism. Unlike traditional modes of commemoration that project a specific perception of the past onto the space of a museum or a designated area of the city, these artistic interventions instill fragments of the past onto present-day city streets and current residents' daily lives, as if the past was indeed part of the present. This action does not only break prevalent silences in the dominant collective memory by making present what has been absent, erased, and forgotten, it also raises the question, what if? How would life in the present look like had historical events unfolded differently? These artworks expose the construction of temporal connections between a certain past, a present, and the future in the dominant historical narrative, national and colonial, questioning the very construction of collective memory. So, yes. So after addressing the relations between memory, action, and activism and transformation, and the question, what is memory? I will show some examples of such memorial interventions in Israel-Palestine since 2000, and point to other cases if I have time, but I probably won't. And I will conclude with thoughts about the importance of fiction and imagination in reconfiguring temporal relations as a form of intervention. What is memory? How is it related to political imagination? Conceptually, I will argue that social or collective memory is closely tied to action and transformation. Olick, Robbins, Confin, Origny, and others have already defined memory as a form of social action or practice. And I previously linked it to activism, but here I will focus or I will use both classical and more recent theory in memory studies to address memory's potential for transformation. First, social memory is always a product of a group in the present, according to Maurice Halbwachs in 1925. Halbwachs argued that memory is a social construction framed by the norms, interests, structures, and ideas of a group and its specific space and time. If we think about imagination in this sense, our ideas are not bounded by the past, as we often think, making it difficult to imagine new futures, because our perception of the past is also created in the present, like our vision of the future. This means that the past, present, and future have dynamic relations in memory, rather than a linear trajectory that unfolds in time. For example, visions for the future often construct a complementary view of the past. Second, although we often see memory as hegemonic, top-down creation of the nation state, memory scholarship in the 90s suggested that it is, in fact, a very dynamic and processual site of constant struggle between competing interpretations of the past. Even the dominant or official view of the past requires activation and reproduction because of constant conflicts and contestations between competing views of the past by different groups in the present. This view of memory as a dynamic side of struggle between unequal, dominant, and marginalized memories summons activism, as memory is a power-infused resource in grassroots struggles over hegemony, as Chantobol and Hansen, as well as Bell, argued. As I previously proposed, memory often serves those in power, but it can also be a weapon of the weak. Third, deploying memory as a practice has a transformative potential. Elizabeth Jellin argued that engaging in memory work is participating in the symbolic change of meaning in the world. The political engagement of memory work involves not only publicly dealing with past atrocities, but also imagining new futures. This is Jelling and also Karen Thiel. The following examples of memorial interventions demonstrate this capacity for change by using the dynamic and contested nature of memory. The first three memorial interventions that I will show were commissioned by Autobiography of a City, a group of Jewish, Israeli, and Arab Palestinian artists in the binational city of Jaffa, who designed and operated an internet archive of digital testimonies of city residents, mostly Palestinians, about their life before and during the 48 war, known as the Nakba, the catastrophe in Arabic. Artists are then invited to use the testimonies for site-specific artistic work in the city. One of the early works is by Jewish Israeli artist Onan Edelman, who, using equipment for marking the court lines of football stadiums, drew the grid of the demolished Palestinian Jewish neighborhood of Manshia onto today's space, the recreational Charles Clough Park. The Manshia quarter was a Muslim suburb of Jaffa in the 80s with some Jewish residents. It was occupied by the right-wing Jewish militia, the Etzel, in 48 and suffered massive destruction. Then it was accommodated by Jewish immigrants, many of them Holocaust survivors. The neighborhood was demolished in the 60s for the construction of today's park. In addition to revealing the past that lies underneath today's park, without stopping the movement and space use of today's residents, the remapping was treated as an event or operation to which residents and regular users of the space, past and present, were invited, and during which various encounters, questions, and conversations, sometimes heated debates, took place and memories were exchanged. The operation and conversations are available also in a short clip on YouTube. Another work for Autobiography of a City in 2008 was an organized tour by Ohad Avrami with video clips in collaboration with Skander Kopti and performances by System Ali and Public Movement. Avrami organized a bus tour of Jaffa that stops in different spots in the city, like a regular guided tour. In these stops, participants met different figures from the city's past or present who told them stories or showed them sites and activities they were involved with. Unlike the common or touristic experience of Jews and internationals in Jaffa, many of these sites in this tour were neglected, dilapidated, and mundane, and some of these personal stories were fictional or banal. The videos that were shown on the bus in between, preparing participants for the next stop, also interweaved fiction and fact and replaced past glory with present banality and wretchedness. I'll show quickly one of these clips. Just a minute or two.
אתה רואה סן? זה אחד המונומנטים החשובים ביפו. אחד מתוך 5 פסלים שעיריית תל אביב הניחה ביפו. הפסל הזה ממוקם במרכז הכי חשוב ביפו. המרכז התרבותי והכלכלי של יפו. מרכז הומי אדם, שכולם יעברו ויראו ויתגאו בפסל הזה של אהובנו יפת טורק. האנדרטה הזאת היא על שמו של השחקן האגדי היפואי יפת טורק. ואיך שאתה רואה, הרי הפסל הזה מנציח את הרגע של הבעיטה האדירה של יפת טורק במשחקו נגד בית"ר ירושלים, לא זוכר בדיוק בזה שנה, שהוא הכניע את בית"ר ירושלים 2-1 בדקה 92. אתה רואה סן? הפסל הזה הוא בעצם פה כדי להזכיר לנו, לכל תושבי יפו, הערבים, שאתה בטח יודע את מידת יריבותם לקבוצת בית"ר ירושלים. זה הרגע שבו אנחנו ניצחנו את בית"ר ירושלים, ואת זה אנחנו נזכור לעד וננציח את זה בצורת הפסל הזה של ריפעת טורק. בעצם הפסל הזה עשוי משני חומרים מתכתיים. אתה רואה סן? היותר מוזהב זה נחושת והיותר שחור זה ברונזה. הגוף עשוי מברונזה כי הרי ריפעת טורק הוא כושי. ושאר החלקים בהם השיער והנעליים והכדור עשויים מנחושת, כי הרי זה החומר שהוא מאוד שכיח ביפו, באדמה של יפו.
Okay, you get the idea. Yes. So in this video, Kopti introduces to his puppet son a statue's history, attaching symbolic national meaning and aesthetic value to it. Kopti combines a tour guide's knowledge with family storytelling against the background of passing cars and dilapidated surroundings, bringing the ethos of a tour guide and father to a semi-deserted, neglected neighborhood turns the site, the statue, and the content of the story, which is Palestinian national history or pride, into a parody. The clips also resemble the old-time Israeli TV show Sami and Susu, which was the ultimate symbol of Jewish-Palestinian coexistence. In actuality, the statue is of a Jewish soccer player that was a member of the Etzel. Avrami and Kopti used different memory practices in the bus tour. Testimonies and storytelling, the guided tour, a search of family roots, and even a ceremony that mimics state commemoration to present a very different, almost opposite content than anticipated. They mix the past and the present and produce knowledge and imagination that greatly differ both from the touristic experience and from the national narrative of Jews and of Palestinians regarding Jaffa. The mixing of fiction and seemingly factual and authoritative forms of displaying knowledge appear in other projects by Autobiography of a City. Very briefly, this project, Jaffa 2030, Map Tours and Visitors Center in September 2012 was part of a citywide events of the province artistic project. And here they launched a map that showed Jaffa as a city embedded in a different context than the present one. The context is basically taken from its pre-48 past, the Arab Middle Eastern world, and is imagined as the future of Jaffa in 2030. The map was the basis for a visitor center where you can register for tours of the city in 2030. And I have here a quote from the Visitors Center website. Come visit a city we don't live in still, but we should ask ourselves how we might. And here mapping the scientific tool that draws national borders between populations living in a shared space is used to lift borders and free Jaffa from the binding Israeli borders within and without, and reunite it with the region. Based on its pre-state past, Jaffa 2030 is imagined to be a cosmopolitan city that accommodates various populations excluded from the borders of the nation state, and that is connected to urban centers from Beirut, Cairo, and Damascus to Barcelona and Marseille. The last work that I'll show is by Zochrot. Zochrot is a memory activism group that organizes walking tours of destroyed Palestinian villages and neighborhoods from the 48 war around Israel. But Zochrot also initiated artistic and literary projects, one of which was Bridging Memory in 2007, which instilled real-size photos of 13 Palestinian refugees from the Al-Khilwa refugee camp in Lebanon onto their pre-48 villages in Israel. Here you see the process from the right, the photographer Tayre Barsilo in Al-Khilwa, Ahmed Salim Al-Khatib from the village Aras El-Ahmar, today Kerem Ben Zimra, poses for the picture in Lebanon. And then you see another refugee, but the process was done for each of them, exhibited in today's village ruins. This symbolic return of refugees to their villages helps us visualize who the refugees are and what would a shared life would look if the Nakba didn't happen. By raising the question, what if these memorial interventions propose a potential history, to quote Azulay, or a counterfactual history that counters the dominant national narrative. Local and national spaces are reconfigured, but temporal relations are the subject of inquiry, as the nationally framed linear connection between a past, a present, and a future is opened for examination and infused with imagination. Opening the linear trajectory of official history to imagination inserts fiction into the dominant historical record as a way of questioning its validity and authority, or saying the official record also has arbitrariness and fiction. Instead of presenting a new dominant narrative, present-day residents are invited to participate in the imagining and to offer an alternative understanding of the past that could lead to a different understanding, of the present and future. But we should consider the limits and perils of what if. On the one hand, it raises to consciousness highly contested and polarizing issues of refugees and property ownership, and land by present-day residents, and by so doing intervenes in the dominant justification for the state of events. But in terms of actual material or structural intervention, what if remains extremely hypothetical. There's no cost in imagining what if. Yet it is a participatory and interactive mode of memory activism that enables, to different extents, current residents and visitors to share their own experience and infuse memory with many perspectives before sealing it again in a linear narrative. Yet, by so doing, what if deconstructs not only the historical record or official history, but also memory itself by revealing the constructions, the temporal constructions at its basis. Thank you.